Patrick Morrow, St Michael and all angels with St Mary, Little Ilford, Chelmsford Diocese, Holy Monday. The Lord be with you. Echa, Yashva Vadad, Ha'ir Rabati Am, Hayataka Almana, Rabati Vagoyin, Sarati B'Medinot, Hayata Lamas. Lonely sits the city once great with people. She that was great among the nations is become like a widow. The princess among states is become a thrall. Lonely sits the city once great with people. These are not, of course, words first written to apply to London in 2020, though they tragically do. They are words from the Bible and from the Book of Lamentations. The translation, by the way, is the New Jewish Publication Society translation. The Book of Lamentations is a series of carefully crafted laments that refer to the destruction of Jerusalem in the events that also lead to the exile of the people of Judah into Babylon, the so-called first exile. Jewish people chant the whole Book of Lamentations at a service on Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of the Jewish month of Av, which occurs later in the summer. Liturgically minded Christians read the Book of Lamentations in precisely this week, in Holy Week, either at morning prayer and evening prayer, in the normal run of things, or sometimes in special services, and perhaps especially as a way of ending the desperate ending of the service on Maundy Thursday when the disciples scatter. And when I say carefully crafted, I use the words advisedly. There is a dirge quality to the actual poetry. So, da-dum, 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 da-dum. The very poetry and the flow of the syllables makes you slow down and inhabit your grief. So we might read, lonely sits the city once great, she that was once great, a widow, and so on. And I won't hide from you the fact that the dominant idea behind the Lamentations is that God's self is punishing his chosen people. And that might make us uncomfortable in more than one way. Firstly, remembering that we are reading this book in precisely the Christian Holy Week. At a surface level, at least, it might seem to be part of that Christian tradition that I've spoken of often enough, that says the Jewish people were heavily complicit in the death of Christ, if not the instigators of the death of Christ, and therefore deserve punishment. So Christ is killed around AD 30, the temple is destroyed in AD 70, and the people are sent into exile in AD 135. All of this is God's will, a linear act. That is bad theology, but as I speak about that in enough other places. We might in any event think that it's bad theology to imagine God actively punishing people. And indeed, I would say that is correct. It's a huge issue, and I can't do it justice here. But just to say we are free to read the Book of Lamentations in another way. By which I mean, we're free to see the lament, the grief, the loss, as coming from a moment of awareness which God graciously gives us of how far away we are from Christ at that particular moment. Our sins are not so much punished, but our sins have the, let's use the word, the natural effect, the inevitable effect of pushing Christ away, as we seek to be in charge of our own life, as we act out of coldness of heart, as we act out of habit or out of fear, rather than out of love, and so on. All of these things push gracious Christ away from us. That is never the whole of the story, because Christ comes running to us, like the prodigal father in the story of the prodigal son. That is the message of Easter and the resurrection accounts. But because that is not the whole story, that does not mean it is not part of the story. And we in this great and holy week might, should find some way to inhabit the prior truth that our sins do push Christ away and lead him to the cross. It was always the authentic Christian theology that the sinfulness of each human being drives Christ to the cross, and the sinfulness of Christians is extra loaded in that, because we alone have no excuse. So let us lament. And if we're not lamenting for ourselves, let us lament for those who are lamenting at this time. And if we're not lamenting for particular people, there is a sense in which this is indeed the message for us now, as we lament the mess we are in, because we have failed sufficiently to prepare, to care for the vulnerable people around us, and are now having to do a catch-up job, which is painful, agonizing, and faulty. So lament is indeed called for. And here is one other thing, a true story. A practicing Jew was asked to put together a liturgy to commemorate the Holocaust, the Shoah, to use the Hebrew word. He accepted this, and he researched, and he reflected, and he reflected, and he researched. And in the course of that task, he was aware that he was becoming more and more angry with God. Why did God let it happen? But he ploughed on with the task, and he in fact quoted from Lamentations, the beginning of the 3rd chapter, which reads thus: I am the man who has known affliction under the rod of his wrath. Me he drove on and on in unrelieved darkness. On none but me he brings down his hand, again and again without cease. I just wonder, this is a big ask, but I wonder if you see at all what he saw. He saw rather too many echoes, rather more echoes than he was pleased to see, with the most beloved of all Psalms, Psalm 23. He thought that the writer of the Book of Lamentations was inverting verses of Psalm 23, offering a parody of them, a cruel, hard joke based on Psalm 23. Think about it. Here is one rather legitimate rephrasing of Lamentations. The Lord is my shepherd, he makes me lack. He leads me on and on, nowhere to lie. His rod he uses with anger, it brings pain. I walk in the shadow of death, no relief. That's not a translation, but it is a legitimate interpretation. So you see what that Jewish compiler of liturgy himself saw. The writer of Lamentations is himself hugely disappointed with God, or indeed, let's say it, was furious with God for abandoning him or his people and leaving them in this terrible mess, was furious with God. And of course, at a deeper level, that also tells us that the writer of Lamentations was still preserving, I don't say enjoying, but preserving intimacy with God, still thought that God would hear him, would tolerate and do more than tolerate his rage, would encompass his rage and stay with him. So here too is a reason why we may lament, might lament, should lament in precisely these days. God bless you.